Hello, Heathens. Welcome back. I am here today with the one and only Dr. Bradley, nay, Brad Onishi. And I hope I pronounced that correctly. I usually ask before the show, and I just winged it. I have been trying to get this man here for a while, but he's very popular, you know, he's somewhat of a celebrity in academic circles. But he's here, and I'm super excited. Lots of you already know who he is. I talked about him and this interview on TikTok a little bit today, and everybody was like, oh, I love him. I love his podcast. I was like, well, suck it, plebes. No, I'm just kidding. I said, well, make sure you tune in.
Yep.
This is going to be a good time. I can feel it in my bones. You know, I was laughing before it started, so I think we're good to go. Now, as always, I am going to let Brad introduce Brad, since he knows himself better than I do. So, Brad, take it away. Thanks for being here.
No, first of all, thanks for having me. And second, you said you've been trying to get me here, but I have not been resisting. You know, it's not like I was pushing you off. I was like, as soon as you gave me a date, I was here. So I want to say that.
That's true.
And third, I would say...
What I mean is I've just been thinking about it for a long time, and I expected you, like, telekinetically to like, just put it on the calendar on a date that would work for me personally, so...
And that I accept as my fault. That I accept was my...
Whose else could it be?
My failing. And so, yes, I am, a scholar of religion. I teach at University of San Francisco, and I host a show called Straight White American Jesus, which is all about Christian nationalism and the religious right. And I have a book coming out on that subject. And more to say about kind of what I do and who I am, but that's kind of a good start. So,
thank you. So, this is funny. I actually have no idea if you know anything about what I do on TikTok.
I do.
I do. Because I only know you from Twitter. And largely what I've done on that platform is deconstruction stuff. So I left the church about 10 years ago, and I sort of stumbled onto this app at the behest of my little sisters. And I was like, I'm old. Like, I don't need to be on this child's dancing app. And so got on, found the deconstruction community, and was like, oh, people care about this now? Awesome, because nobody did when I left the church, which is fine, but it was just a new experience. And so I talk a lot about religious trauma, about legitimate scholarship, if you actually want to know about what the Bible has to say. So I think first what I'd like to start with is, did you grow up religious? And if you did, I want the deets, Yeah. I love hearing about people's fucked up childhoods. No, not their childhoods, but in the church, there's always some weird shit going on.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I got you. So I grew up, in one sense, non-religious. My mom's like a white lady from Tennessee, and she was kind of like nominally Christian. My dad, Japanese guy from Maui, nominally Buddhist, Buddhist, and like went to mow the lawn at the temple every week and that kind of stuff.
That's so wholesome.
It's super wholesome, but like neither of them, I think they agreed in this like interracial, interfaith marriage they had that like there would be no religion because then too many fights.
Where did you grow up?
So Southern California. So I'm like down in like North Orange County. So kind of like Anaheimish kind of place.
Yeah.
And very, very middle class, like not the real OC Laguna Beach kind of stuff. Like dad drove a Corolla, you know what I mean? Kind of business. Yeah. And we, we're not a religious family. I was kind of a little punk kid. I got in a lot of trouble when I was like in junior high. My hair changed colors like every week. I was very like into the whole grunge thing. Drugs, sex, rock and roll, 7th and 8th grade. That's what I was doing. And then in 8th grade, my like girlfriend was like, do you want to go to church? And I was like, oh yeah, it's a Wednesday night Bible study. There's no way mom, who's already suspicious of my like friends, is going to say no to me going to church because she's so like worried that I'm a little punk kid. So of course mom was like, yes, I'll take you to church. That sounds like a good turn of direction. And in my head, I was like, I'm only going to this so that hopefully girlfriend and I can sneak away and make out. And
yeah.
Who cares about Bible study? Well, I as these things happen, became 100% Jesus freak. At the youth group, like found the cool leaders with the tattoos and the guitars and the long hair, and they were like,
And they're
I had
smoking hot wives.
and the whole jam. And I was like, whoa, you can be like in a punk band and like have tattoos and be a Christian and be a surfer dude. Okay, like that sounds cool. And so girlfriend dumped me, and I went from like punk kid to like just the worst ever Christian convert. Like the kind of guy that stands outside the movie theater and is like, have you met Jesus? Goes to the beach boardwalk and does the same thing. Leads a Bible study. I know you're about to turn this interview off. I better stop.
Because I too did these things. I guess I always wonder if other people that did them were as just painfully uncomfortable as I was, or if like some people were just like all about it and I'm just a weird person that doesn't like to do that stuff.
It was just, I don't know about you, there's just so much guilt. It was like, if I don't go witness to this person, they'll burn in hell. So yes, it's awkward as shit, but like, I better do it. You know what I mean?
Well, God, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, I was taught like, if you could have witnessed to someone and you didn't, their blood is on your hands. Literally. Like, I'm fucking 8 years old. Relax. Like, sorry.
Right?
I guess I should give a language warning for people, not for people that watch, because y'all know me. But like, I'm just being my whole self tonight, Sorry, I derailed that. But yeah, so preaching on the boardwalk, just generally making people uncomfortable.
Yeah, so then I met my high school sweetheart like freshman year of college, or freshman year of high school. And that also coincided with my Jesus freak kind of moment. So we got married by the time I was 20, and then I was in full-time ministry at that time. So by the time I was 20, full-time ministry at the megachurch, married, and only had finished 2 years of college at that point, and off and running. Like, we were both youth ministers at the church.
Just like a regular Carl Lentz before he went off the deep end,
It was like and they really looked at us, right? Like we were the next generation of golden leader. We were the ones that they pinned their hopes on because we were 20, we were young, we did everything right, all the purity culture stuff.
Also, saying that, I realized, might make it sound like I was saying that, like, you sexually harassed young girls or something, and that's not what I was saying. I mainly meant the, like, vibe. Sorry. For the record, I did not sexually harass anyone, I will say. I really know how to make things awkward.
Oh, no, I'm good. Like, so, like, the thing, I don't know about, like, just, like, I think the youth pastor is the easiest person to shit on for good reason. So, I'm totally up for it. Like, I was a youth pastor. I'm up for it. Take your best shot because we deserve it. So, but for the record, was not a youth pastor who sexually harassed anyone did,
sorry.
If you're listening,
it's been 10 minutes, you guys.
If you're listening, internet, okay? I'm just
listen.
Make fun of me for being a youth pastor.
Onishi was not that type of youth pastor, and he's also never going to come back on my show.
Oh no, I'm good. I'm totally good. Yeah. So and then like by the time I was a senior in high school, like 2 years later, I was so done. I was like reading a lot, just like you, I know you were always digging into the New Testament scholarship. Like I was digging into some of that stuff. I was going down the theology track, and I was like leading prayers at the church in front of 2,000 people. And I wasn't sure I believed in God anymore.
Oh my
you know
God.
What I mean?
And you said that was after your second year of college?
So I got married then. And then by the time I got to like, the last year of college or the first year of seminary, I was like,
seminary. Got it.
I don't even know if I believe in God anymore. What am I doing? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
well, I do feel like seminary, it seems to be this like pipeline right out of religion, especially if you grew up fundamentalist, because unless you go to just an incredibly conservative seminary, William E. Wolf, I'm looking at you, your fake ass degrees, unless you go to like a super conservative seminary, like you're gonna get your brain like rocked because they just don't teach you that stuff. And I haven't even gone to seminary, but just speaking with people who have, like, I remember when I realized that like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were anonymous.
Yeah.
I about passed out.
Yeah. Right.
Because the church is like, these are 4 eyewitness accounts. Not sure where they found 4 men in Palestine named Matthew, Mark. No, just kidding. I know it's a transliteration. Anyway, sorry. So you're leading prayers. You're not really sure you believe it. If you don't mind me asking, like, what was your wife thinking during all of this? Was she sort of on the path with you?
Yeah, yes and no. Like, it's really hard to explain her to people because she is, to this day, and we're still friends. Like, we got divorced.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, we got divorced. So basically the next chapter was like, we moved to England because I was like, we both decided we needed to get out. So I was like, if I want to become a Christian theologian someday, I'll just go get a degree in England and we'll get away from the church and then we can be free and we'll figure it out. So we moved to England and then we quickly got divorced and she came home. And it was it was
sorry, not to laugh at your pain or anything.
But... Oh, no. It was it was a good time. And we're still friends like 20 years later, 15 years later. And she was like, she still remains to this day the most charismatic person I've ever met. Like is an absolute, the person who walks in the room and everyone is her friend by the time she leaves. And so the kind of beliefs and the kinds of like theology stuff, I think bothered her, but socially she was so fluid and just out of this world that I'm so much more interior and I'm so much more just like brooding that I would just go home and be like, this doesn't make sense. Like Jessica said, like the gospels are all a mess.
I can't
this
let
is
it
all
go.
horseshit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's I think we probably have similar brains in the sense that like when something doesn't make sense to me, I can't let it go. I can't let it go until I make it make sense. And like at a certain point, it's just like, yeah, I'm working so hard to make something make sense when like Occam's razor is that like, yeah, hey, this probably isn't one like book written in a univocal voice, right? Like it's probably 66 books and like probably what the scholars are saying about this is correct, and what my pastor is saying, who's from bumfuck nowhere, has, might just be what he wants me to think. But like, it is exhausting because when stuff doesn't make sense and you're just sitting there day after day, like, am I insane? Like, is nobody else seeing this? Does nobody else care? Like, why does this make sense to you? And why can't it work for me? Like, anyway.
And once you get, and the problem is once you get on that train at church, like people don't want to hear it. They start looking at you as like kind of a problem or kind of like you need, right? And it's just, you don't know where to go. Like, how do I explain these doubts and these worries in a way that someone will actually listen?
But I mean, at my church anyway, they would say like, God can handle your questions and God is bigger than your doubts and yada, yada, yada. And like, it's okay to ask questions, but really it's only okay to ask questions up to a point.
Yeah.
And at least where I was, maybe it's different for other people, but chances are if I've spent a year reading about something and I can't find a satisfactory answer, then like whatever this person is spouting off the top of their head is probably not a satisfactory answer. Unless it's like I'm talking to a scholar that studies this very specific thing, then yeah, sure, they probably know more than me. But if it's just my pastor who has no anything, I don't know, but miss me with that.
I remember like I had this book on the atonement and it was like it's exactly what you're saying. I was like hung up on it. I couldn't let it go. Like, how does Jesus dying lead to everyone being forgiven, all this stuff. And I asked one of the pastors at the church where I worked, he was in the office next to me, and he was like, I don't know why you're reading that book. And I was like, okay, is that because you think it's like dangerous theologically or something?
Unsound.
He was like, nope. I just think this stuff is really boring, and I think we should just be out there ministering. I don't know why we're in here talking about books and theology, and I was like, got it. Okay. Yep.
Totally. Like, yeah, why would we wonder about the absolute crux of our entire religious belief system? Yeah.
Yeah.
Trifles.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So you went off to, England.
Yep.
And you got your PhD there?
So I applied to all these programs in England. I was not prepared. I went to a Christian college that didn't
me
prepare
applying
me for
to
things.
grad school right now, but
okay. All right. Yes, we should commiserate because, and I applied to all these places that I had no business getting into. We go to Oxford to visit the year before, and my wife, who I just mentioned was the most charismatic person ever, basically like came into the meeting with me with this very famous professor, and he they talked about books and literature. Anyway, somehow I think that's how I got into Oxford University to do a master's degree.
She's a real one.
Yeah, it was, it was good. Then I came back after 2 years to do my PhD at UCSB down in Santa Barbara.
Oh, okay.
And that's when I really got out. Like, that was really when I went from like theology to religious studies, because UCSB is a public school. They don't do theology. They do the study of religion, right? And so that's when I kind of changed games a little bit. Awesome.
So when would you say was it when you moved to England that you were sort of like, yeah, I'm not a Christian anymore?
Yeah. So it was really faster than I thought, because what I thought was like, I've been at this church in ministry for 7 years since I was 18. I'm now like 24. I'm going to go. I can't wait to get to England because no one will be watching me. No one will be policing me. Not only can I read all these books that they think are like boring or dangerous, but I can go to the like super high church Anglicans and do the liturgy thing. Oh, that'll be so fun. I can go to like the Methodist church and like the social justice, like fiery, Methodist ethos. I can go to the Quaker meeting. I did some of that, but it was like after 3 months,
it's actually not as fun as I had anticipated.
not as fun. And it's Sunday. I'm just going to sleep in. I'm going to sleep because you know what? Saturday I went to the pub and that was super fun. So now it's Sunday and I'm just going to sleep in. You know what I mean?
Did you so I know I did. I'm just curious. So for a long time after I've sort of decided like, yeah, I'm not really a Christian, I still had all of this like residual, I don't know if it's guilt or just conditioning, but like I would have to talk myself through like going out and how it's actually okay. And like, it's not sinful to like have a drink with your friends. And actually, if I talk to a guy, like that's also not sinful. And like for a while it was very tumultuous, I guess tumultuous, something like that. But on the other side of it, I am so much more peaceful not being a Christian. And I don't know how, did you experience that in the same way? Or like, did you find more peace sort of when you had answers, even though they were bad answers?
No, everything you just described, I felt that. So like I think something that people don't understand about deconstruction is like, you go from this world of moral absolutes to like having as an adult to figure out what's right, what's good, what's comfortable for you,
what you value, what you value.
Totally. So, went through all of that, and like, the dating, like the trying to date, like I got married to my high school sweet. I was with somebody from age 14 to 24. I never like dated in high school except for one person. I never like broke up with someone or had them break up with me. I never had a thing where I went on one date with someone and then none of that.
Yeah.
So
that
was a whole thing that I had to navigate. And like, should I feel bad? I had 2 beers last night. Is that too many? I had 4 beers last night. Was that too many? Should I like feel guilty? Am I out of control? Is it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
4 beers. I mean, that's a slippery slope right to hell. Yeah.
But that, but like, is right. That process you described to me, that's what that looks like. So anyway, yeah.
So I don't want to jump around too much, but I was listening to an episode of your podcast yesterday, and it was a preview of one of the chapters in your upcoming book. No, not upcoming. It's out now. Which I'm not going to call the wrong name. The other Christian nationalist book. Just kidding. I know. It's called Preparing for War. And I want to talk about that because I grew up in this like very evangelical setting where everything was a battle and everything is spiritual warfare. And like, I had been sort of screaming for a while now that like Christians want to rule the country, and not like they want to rule the country, and they want to force everybody into what they view as right and correct. And they actually don't care what it takes to get there. They don't. But the episode I was listening to was talking about how Christian nationalism is sort of the original purity culture, and how it, at the very least, fueled purity culture, if purity culture wasn't actually just another iteration of Christian nationalism. And I tried to explain it on TikTok today, but I just sent people to your episode because I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm just fumbling right now. But I would love to talk a little bit more about that with you because I thought it was very insightful. And for those of us that grew up in purity culture, that nightmarish hellscape, I think it makes a whole lot of sense, and it might be like a missing piece for people in their sort of healing journey.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought this up because for me, when I was writing the book and I kind of put this together, I was like, oh my God, it blew my mind. And here's how I think about it. I think about purity culture as on the surface, hey, don't have sex before you're married. Okay, fine. But it's obviously more than that. It's, hey, if you think about anyone sexually, you're committing adultery. Okay, that's different. Yeah, that's different. That's different. Okay. And then there's all of the gendered stuff. So women, you are the gatekeepers. Girls, women, you're the gatekeepers of sexuality. Don't be a stumbling block.
I'm a stumbling block right now to everybody watching because you can see I have shoulders.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sorry.
Yeah. No, I mean, I didn't want to say it, but yeah. I mean, I think so. Yeah. And so don't be a stumbling block. Women just want sex for intimacy, not pleasure. So if you have sexual sin, woman, it's your fault. Man, you need to fight your body, but also fight your brain, and your mind is the thing that will take you into the worst place, blah, blah, blah. So there's gendered aspects. There is, hate your body aspects.
Oh, God. Yeah.
But there's also the national aspect. So like if you go back and listen to all that, focus on the family stuff and the purity culture stuff, it really is if you as teenagers, as a generation, are willing to be pure and to be, sexual crusaders who resist blah, blah, blah.
Then you will fuel an entire industry of therapists in about 10 years. Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry.
That. But you'll also, like, in their mind, what you'll do is you'll save the nation, right? So, like, sexual purity is the way to national renewal. Okay, wait a minute. This is where, like, my mind started to just, like, lose it when I was writing this stuff. I was like, okay, sexual purity leads to national renewal. Why? Because sexually pure people under this regime, right, they enter into heterosexual marriages. They have lots of babies from these marriages, and they order their families according to a kind of complementarian patriarchal ideal. The man's in charge, the woman is submissive, the children are submissive to the man who's the voice of God in the household. And then if you expand the nation and you have all these families working that way, you have a nation that is patriarchal, complementarian. It's based on a nuclear family. It's based on submission of children and women.
Nuclear family is such bullshit. Sorry. I also was listening to your interview with Jamar Tisby earlier, and I was like raging at the dog park. Sorry, I need to stop interrupting you. It's a bad habit.
No. But like, I mean, Jamar Tisby is amazing, and his insight just
anyway,
like
Jamar, if you're listening,
come on down.
Yeah, come on.
And so, what hit me then is like, okay, so let's talk. So that's one side, right? Let's talk about Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism is about purifying the social and political order so that it looks like God wants it to look. How does God want it to look? He wants it to look like there's no queerness, right? There's no lesbian or gay or bisexual people, no trans people, no gender nonconforming people. All right. He wants it to look like men married to women and those women being submissive. Okay. He also really has chosen the United States for an exceptional part in history. So he wants to protect America and its borders and its boundaries, okay? And God wants, us to stick together as a people, and so we should have native-born people, right, who are in charge of the country and so on. Now, let's put the two pieces together. Christian nationalism is trying to purify the nation. It's trying to get rid of all those things that are considered contagions or diseases or as impurities, and that could be people of color. That could be queer people. That could be people who have families that don't look like the ones we talked about. That could look like immigrants who don't, quote unquote, assimilate in the way that they should assimilate, the bad immigrants. This could look like people who are not Christians and not willing to play by the rules of a Christian nation. So if Christian nationalism is trying to purify the nation, purity culture is just painting and launching onto the canvas of teenage flesh all of those hopes and dreams. If we can just get teenagers to regulate their sex lives and their family lives and their desires, then we'll have the pure nation Christian nationalism wants, and we're off and running.
It's something I was thinking about when I was listening to that, well, sort of later, because I was mulling it over a bit, was that the other thing that it does, and I think it's actually just sort of an outgrowth of exactly what you're saying, but when you indoctrinate teenagers in this way and you insulate them, because that's what you're doing, right? You have friends that are all thinking the same thing. You marry someone that's thinking the same thing. And then you have children, you teach them to think the same things. What you're also doing is replicating a very similar type of person that not only thinks and believes in the same way, but votes in the same way. And like, if people, I know not everyone grew up in the church, but like, if y'all don't think that voting correctly, whatever that means for them, is like, it's foundational doctrine for them. Like, and they only vote on like 2 issues, LGBTQIA+ and abortion. And they all have these weird images of their head of like baby parts, like, because there was some propaganda piece once, and like, this is what's going on. And like, the other thing that they do, but like you said, it's complementarian. Women are taught not to speak up or question. They just follow their husband's lead, however he's voting. And so it creates a myriad of problems, obviously. But I would like to thank you for sort of talking about that. I think it's really important. And I think I just gave people, or you just gave people at home, a bunch more to unpack for themselves. I know it did for me. So in your new book, you talk about sort of this history of policies and movements that have led to this moment in history where we have this white Christian nationalist. It's almost an amorphous movement because it can encapsulate so many people while defining nothing at all, really. Like it's very, but that's why it's so insidious, because it sort of gets all of these people into under one banner. Mm-hmm. And whether or not they actually identify as like hardcore Jesus freaks, lots of people in the country just sort of offhandedly, if you ask them if they're religious, they'd say they're a Christian, even if they're not active in a church. Like, it's, they were just born in, I guess I'm a Christian. Yep. So obviously I don't want you to give the whole book away, and we will link all of your stuff in the show notes, but can you maybe point to a couple of key or pivotal moments where things either coalesced, I guess that's a good way to put it, they coalesced to sort of push this movement forward in really important ways?
Yeah, for sure. So great question. I start the book in the 1960s because, and I know folks who grew up in this culture will know this, that so much of the rhetoric about when the country lost its way was the 1960s. So the 1960s, just very generally, is the time of civil rights movement. It's the time of women entering the workforce and being able to get divorced with just, no excuse divorce. It's the time of women's liberation. It's also the time of Stonewall and queer liberation. It's the time when the Immigration Act passes in 1965. So immigration policy changes dramatically. It's the time of the Vietnam War. I could go on and on. The Loving case, I'm the son of a Japanese guy and a white woman. And so the Loving case finally makes interracial marriage, legal in every state. Blah, 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 blah. Well,
the 1960s, people. Sorry. The 1960s.
Right. And so for a lot of us, it's like the 60s are the time when so many good things got started. Now they're not finished, but at least they got moving and we got kind of going. For the Christian nationalists, this is when the country supposedly lost its way. And so the 1960s are really when we can start to detect a counter-revolution to all that stuff I just listed that says we've got to get the country back in order, because all of these people of color, all these immigrants, all of these women, all of these gay and lesbian and other, queer folks, they're now wanting equal rights. They're now wanting representation. They're now wanting full participation in the United States of America on every level.
The audacity.
So we've got to wage war. We've got to wage a war to get this thwarted. And so to me, that's why the 60s are really like where I start. I think a great example of how this came to a head is about 15 years later. So 1976, Jimmy Carter is elected president. Now, I know a lot of you out there know about Jimmy Carter, but Jimmy Carter is like made in the lab white Christian guy. He's born in rural Georgia on a farm. He marries his high school sweetheart. The only woman he's ever kissed in his life is the woman he's been married to now for 70 years. He joins the military and becomes an officer. He teaches Sunday school in his Southern Baptist church. He cannot be more of a tried and true white Christian good old boy, right?
Yeah.
He's president in 1976. By the time he runs for re-election, Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, Tim LaHaye, and all of the political midwives from the Council for National Policy, Paul Weyrich and Richard Viguerie, they had all joined forces to get rid of him because he was a Christian, but not a Christian nationalist. He was very much about the cross. He was very much not about mixing the flag and the cross. So who do they want to be president? Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan is a divorced Hollywood actor who has very bad relationships with his children. His wife, Nancy, is very into astrology. No shade. That's great. Go ahead, Nancy. Do what you want. I'm just saying, if you're a Christian nationalist, that's not your jam.
Yeah. Post your 3 main signs in the comments. Just
no, yeah, like go for, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get it.
And like Nancy, Ronald Reagan was totally pro-abortion at one time as governor of California, and was not totally religiously literate, right? What's my point with that? When people say Donald Trump came out of nowhere and he was this candidate that like people never could expect, I'm like, go back and look at Ronald Reagan. Yep. Ronald Reagan is an extremist. He's not a conservative. He's an extremist. He coded his racist language in states' rights ideas and in other ways. He talked about welfare queens and crack addicts in coded racial language. He injected libertarian extremist policies into the country. And he was not a Christian. But he was the choice of the Christian nationalist. Yeah. And to me, that's really big.
I think the root cause of most of my problems as an adult, like they can all be traced back to Ronald Reagan personally.
I like this. This is, wow.
I mean, I think if I think really hard, I can make a connection, because I'm still waiting for those trickle down economics, to get to me. It's been trickling down for some decades now. So I actually wrote my thesis in college on the statistical correlation between early education and crime later in life. And so I did a bunch of sort of research and reading on things like the war on drugs and on this sort of crime and punishment rhetoric that comes out, and how really that's just because the civil rights movement is going on. And so they're criminalizing something that's a right that's encoded into our Constitution, right? Or, sorry, I don't know, our Bill of Rights, whatever it is. Don't kill me, Andrew. But so they can't punish them for that act. So they have to find a way to criminalize them, right? So now they have this sort of dog whistle. It's not sort of, it is a dog whistle. And so we see crime and punishment, or whatever that is more than that. It's very much Black people criminals.
Yes.
White people good. I mean, that's what it boils down to. And like, not in my backyard, right? We need to figure out a way to get them to just simmer down. Yep. Because effectively they don't deserve it. That's the quiet part, right? Like they're trying to think of many ways to say it, but effectively it's still the same old plantation, like slave owner hierarchy, where they don't think that these people are equal, and they don't think that they're capable of governing or taking care of themselves or, doing any of that. And so they just come up with new ways of being a piece of shit. But anyway.
Well, and then you bring in like the AIDS crisis, and not even like Reagan not being willing to, even sort of address the gay community, right? And to talk to gay, community leaders and so on. I mean, so you throw it like everything you just said about Black folks in this country, and then you zoom out to the gay community and the queer community, and so on and so on and so on. So I think that's a key moment. And I also think that, I think if we think about George W. Bush, so hear me out on this. I have no nostalgia for George W. Bush. I'm not going to say anything positive, so no one turn this off. You don't have to brace yourself. I'm not going to say anything nice about George W. Bush. What I am going to say, though, is George W. Bush was supposed to be the Christian president who finally represented all the good evangelicals, and
he was just a boring ass Republican.
He was, and I think that's was the problem. Is I think that like it didn't scratch the itch. Like they finally got what they wanted, and they were like, he's just a boring Republican. I really wanted somebody that was going to be like mean to the people I think are my enemies, and like a lot like more brutal to the people I don't think deserve it.
Yeah, I need like a bully thinking like 1930. No, I mean, but that's what's harkening back to, in my opinion, right? Like they won't ever say that, but like that's who they're advocating for. Someone who will be this lead pipe person to everybody they don't like, so that they can continue to hold the power, and they don't have to actually work any harder. Anyway, not my interview.
No. I mean, I'm just like nodding my head, like, yep, because I think you're so right.
This was my entire childhood, so I could talk about it ad infinitum, but I did not write the book about it, so.
Well, you should. Maybe one day this will be your book someday. You know what I mean? It should be.
Yeah, I'll be writing from like an underground shelter in The Handmaid's Tale. No, sorry, that's very dark. Okay. And then what I was going to say was when Donald Trump first announced he was running for president, I remember immediately saying he's going to win. Like immediately. And everybody around me was like, there's no way he's going to win. Like, this is a joke. And I was like, he's going to win. Like, he's going to win. Because that's what these people want. They don't care if he's smart. They don't care if he's moral. They don't care about any of that. What they care about is that he will give them the power they want while assaulting the people they don't like. So
totally. So in the other book, The Flag and the Cross by Perry and Gorski, who are great scholars, great people, and wrote a great book. What they talk about is white Christian nationalism is about order and violence. And it's like, we want everything to be in the right order. And if it's not, we are the ones who have the authority to commit violence. And if other people commit violence, if it is, if we think that it is, protests after police brutality has been committed, that is not the right kind of violence and it is not justified. But if we commit violence in the name of order, the kind of order God wants, then we're justified. So, and here's a piece that I think easily gets missed here is like, we want a pure society. We want a society that's ordered according to a pure vision of the way God wants it. But you know what? God isn't pure. So, and this is, hang with me for a minute. God will be violent if he needs to. God will destroy the whole world if he needs to. God will, in the book of Hosea, drag Israel out to the desert, his wife, and strip her naked and slap her around if he needs to. So
and spread her legs for like people. God, what a guy. Yahweh, if you're listening, get therapy. Yeah.
It's just straight up sexual violence, right? Straight up. Oh. And so the point is like, if God is the one who is impure because he's enforcing purity, then sometimes the leader that we elect and we need is also impure so that we can have the pure society we want. So the guy that we want for the job actually might be best suited if he shows us that he's aggressive and violent and arrogant and willing to just cross every border and boundary, to go way beyond the nice dad jokes of Mike Huckabee or the quips of Ted Cruz or the little like Bible verse quotes of Marco Rubio. No, we don't want that in 2016.
Cancun Cruz.
Give us the dude who will just beat and terrorize and brutalize in order to get the purity we want. That's the guy we want. You know what I mean? So give us the impure guy that will give us the purity we want. And that's the hard part about getting our head around why Trump is the favored guy of these folks. Yeah.
And it's interesting because something that I was taught a lot growing up was that like, and Christians love to trot out like King David to say that like, he was not a perfect person and he did X and he killed people and he did whatever. And like God still used him and he became like the most, famous king of all time. And I'm like, first of all, prove it. Yeah, you can't. Because we have literally one inscription about King David and doesn't look like he was anywhere near as fancy as we all think he was, but okay. I actually had this conversation, with my dad the other night. Sorry. He's still a Christian and he was saying like, hey, but one thing that like lends veracity to the texts, is that they like speak poorly about their own leaders. And I'm like, that has that has absolutely nothing to do with anything. And he was like, well, don't you think, like, you know, if they're writing these texts that they would want to make everything look like new and shiny? And I'm like, I don't know, but it certainly isn't evidence for anything. Like, it's not evidence for anything. Anyway, sorry. But so Christians will say, like, you know, God uses imperfect people. And then, of course, the, like, infamous, like, God's ways are higher than ours. How can we know, right? And then when all else fails, we have to protect the unborn at all costs. Okay.
I can't. Yes. Okay. So yeah. The look on your face. I just was trying to. Yeah. I was worried about you for a minute. I thought you were gonna faint or
have a stroke.
Okay. Yeah. I thought it was.
Yeah.
So here's the really interesting thing about the abortion, and I know many of you listening know this, and I know that this may not be news to people, but you know, if you go back to 1965, and you ask people who are in Texas who are Baptist, hey, should we have abortion? 90% of them are like, we should have abortion in some way. If you ask the leaders, right, the leader of the Southern Baptist Convention comes out in favor of abortion in some form in the 1960s.
What happens? It was a Catholic issue, right?
Exactly. And so what happens is you have political mercenaries who come into the evangelical community and they realize that they're ripe for voter mobilization. So if we can turn abortion into a zero-sum game, all abortion is murder, we can harvest millions of votes from people that will buy that. So in the 1970s, this is what happens. And what I always try to tell people is, like, when you talk to me about abortion as murder, you're not talking theology or the history of Christianity. You're just talking the rhetoric that political mercenaries injected into your community 50 years ago, and you're still believing.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. It's not doctrine. It's political injection.
Yeah. And you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I was under the impression that a large part of the reason that abortion became this sort of deciding factor or like big issue in the community was because they were no longer able to sell the idea of segregation being like a really important thing and worth voting on. Like, people are starting to be like, yeah, like, it's just like, we can sort of see the writing on the wall. Like, we're not going that way. And it's good. Like, we're going to look pretty bad if we continue to try and like vote like that. We can maybe believe it still, but if we're voting on that issue, like, lots of people are going to stay home. And was it Falwell's school that was like so butthurt about like not being able to be segregated? Was it Falwell? I can't remember.
It was Bob Jones. Bob Jones University.
Yes, Bob Jones University. Like,
yep.
Sorry, that's the technical term, butthurt. And so they decided, like, well, this is clearly not working. Not Bob Jones, but like sort of writ large. And then, like you said, these political sort of strategists came in and were like, hey, babies.
Well, and I think too, it's a good way of, if we go back to purity culture and Christian nationalism, it's a really good way to segregate who are good people, who are good parents, who are good citizens. Certainly not those that would kill a child. And usually the people who kill children are those who are, heathens and godless and immoral. And what they're doing then is mapping those adjectives onto, the woman from the underprivileged community, right? Who is seeking, reproductive health care, is perhaps seeking an abortion, and saying, right, I'm going to map onto the young black woman, the young woman of color, and so on and so forth, all these adjectives of impurity.
Right.
And so I think that's there. I also think abortion is really the most ingenious issue to do this with, because none
of them understand science. Yeah.
So, yes.
Sorry.
No. I mean, completely right. The science never comes into it. And I mean, it does in a faux way. But the thing that hits me about it is, like, you are claiming to love the most vulnerable without ever having to listen to them cry, feed them, change their diaper, provide them with housing, provide them with shelter. Like, you're claiming love for the unborn as a way to cover your, like, callousness towards the born and the bodied.
Yep. I mean, it's basically them saying, like, yeah, God wants every child to be born, but he actually doesn't have no contingency plan after that. Like, suck it up, buttercup. Yep. And it's a way for them to feel better like, well, I'm following God's rule. That's not God's rule. You can check out Numbers for that. But no, it's not God's rule. And then it absolves you from responsibility on the other end. Because, okay, we care for the unborn, now they're born. But as soon as they're born, and as soon as they're a child of color in the projects, for instance, now they're public enemy number one, right? And like, there's absolutely no thought given to the fact that we have set minorities up in this country, and I say we as white people in power, and I swear to God, if anybody comes into my comments with some weird not all white people bullshit, like, we're gonna go. And doesn't account for the fact that we've set them up to be disadvantaged across the board. And so saying like, well, this person's impure and this person's bad and this person's not like a good upright citizen, when what they're trying to do actually is like oftentimes give themselves a way out without putting another child into poverty, right? Nobody gets an abortion because it's fun. Even if you know it's the right choice for you, no one's getting it because it's fun, right? Like, it's because they need to get it for some reason. Like, I think Christians think that, like, we just use it as birth control, which, like, reminds me just how much they have no goddamn idea about what happens in medical offices or a biology classroom for that instance. But anyway.
Well, and I think one final thought for me on this too is that the doctrine of original sin is really helpful for this, because as long as you're unborn, you're this angelic, you're this angelic being who's done no wrong. And so we will protect you, we will fight for you, we will. And then as soon as you come into the world,
something about that birth canal,
right?
Well,
and there's the inconvenience of you living, then it's like, well, you're sinful. You're a fallen, sinful being, right?
Yeah.
We can
little thing.
Yeah. And it's a really helpful strategy to couple with this kind of anti-abortion militancy.
Yeah. I will say it's just bizarre to me that anybody could look at a little tiny baby and be like, ooh, you deserve eternal conscious torment for sure.
Yeah,
like, you eat yourself into hell. Like, I just don't get it. I just don't get it. And I want to wrap up soon because I want to be respectful of your time, but something you said earlier was really interesting to me about how Christianity breeds a hatred for the body. And this is something that I've been talking about a lot on and off because, first of all, Christianity is incredibly ableist, but we'll skip over that. You are told to hate your flesh, despise your flesh, and that you actually can't be purified or made any better or holy or whatever until you die, and then go up to heaven where you'll be sanctified and you'll be perfect and whatever. The amount of just intense hatred that people come out of that with for this body that like gets them through life is tragic.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting because we're constantly told to deny our flesh, right? Because if they can convince people to deny what feels natural to them, they start disassociating from themselves, and all they have to hold on to is whatever, like, Darth Vader up there is telling them. So anyway, just an interesting note, because I heard you say that earlier, and it's something I've sort of been on about recently. But, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
No, I was going to wrap up, so if you have a final thought on that.
Oh, no, I just think you're so right, and I think it's so, I know there's so many folks in the deconstruction community and other places that are talking about just helping folks kind of become re-embodied and to become comfortable in their body, to trust their body. And I know in some ways that sounds trite, and it sounds kind of like an IG post or something, but it's really, I know for me, one of the things I've talked about a lot on my show is I did a series called Mild at Heart, and it was like, there's no way that purity culture is symmetrical. It is asymmetrically oppressive for girls and women. Like, there's no doubt. And there's been such good work on this by, Linda K. Klein and Julie Ingersoll and Sarah Mosler and just so many great folks. I think for me as a man, what I realized in purity culture is that my body didn't matter because nobody cared about my body. Like, women were supposedly not attracted to men's bodies. And so it was like, you don't have a body and your body isn't a sexual thing, but your mind is, your worst enemy. And so like when I deconstructed, I tried to figure out,
nowhere is safe.
yeah, like how do I change my thinking, but also how do I inhabit my body for the first time in like ever? Like I have a body. How do I become, and you know, for me that was really hard because here I am like 24 years old. I'm dating for the first time. I have no conception of what that looks like in a healthy way. I also have no conception of myself outside of the church, no conception of my body. I'm an Asian man. And so Asian men are usually sort of, you know, looked at a certain way in society and in dating worlds. And it's just like this crash course in disaster. You know what I mean? Just like so many embarrassing and cringy and just really difficult experiences in that whole dating kind of realm because of that. And so anyway, blah, blah, blah. I just agree with, I'm so glad you talked about it, and I'm so glad you continue to talk about it. And I think we really just can't talk about it enough. So
yes, this time has like flown by. I have had a great time. I hope to whatever is up there that you'll come back and do this with me again sometime.
Oh yeah, anytime.
This is awesome. So before you go, I have one question, and then I want you to like plug all of your stuff. What is your least favorite or most favorite alternatively sort of weird ass theological take that you see floating around right now? Because I know what mine is.
Man.
And it's that Jesus was like an alpha Chad and that's how he survived the crucifixion. Like, my brother in Christ, the whole point is that he did not survive. In fact, like, someone really said like he wouldn't have survived the crucifixion process if he was weak and effeminate.
Oh my God.
You do know he died, right?
Oh,
he died.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, so my podcast is called Straight White American Jesus. I wonder if we should, you know, you should create a spin-off series that's called, you know, Jesus Alpha Chad or something. And, you know,
like Whiskey Tango Foxtrot.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Jesus Alpha Chad, the worst jazz, that's like the worst jazz trio ever. Okay.
Sorry.
My least favorite theological take out there is one that is found in the book, The Case for Christian Nationalism, which is coming out soon. It's a bestseller, unfortunately. And the theological take in there is that even if we had not had original sin, if Adam and Eve had not sinned, that humans would have populated the earth and had separated into different communities and different cultures, and therefore developed nations on their own, even with no fall from the Garden of Eden. Therefore, this theology says, nations are part of God's plan for creation, and Christianity assumes that there will always be separate nations. Therefore, as a Christian, you should defend and support the identity and freedom of your nation and your people. Therefore, Christian nationalism is what God wants from you. That's my least favorite take.
That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Well,
and I'm a woman on the internet.
Yep. So
Yeah.
I talked about this Monday, yesterday on my show, and so if people want to check it out, they can. So,
God, that is
don't.
something.
Or just skip it because you don't need to. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So, on that wild
Beautiful.
ass note,
where
can everybody find you? How can they support you? What books do you have out? We'll link everything, but you know.
Yeah.
I keep calling it Straight White American Jesus Christ, but I think it's just Jesus. It's more like an expletive at the end because I'm like frustrated by the time I've gotten there. Straight White American Jesus Christ. Like,
yeah. So the podcast is Straight White American Jesus. So check that out wherever you get your podcast. The book is called Preparing for War: The Extremist History of White Christian Nationalism and What Comes Next. And it's like kind of a blend of memoir, like my story with this history. So you'll get a lot of like personal stories and vignettes and somebody who was in it, you know, like many of you who are listening and watching. So, so that's the book. And then we have a live event coming, for my show, and that's on November 18th. And
I need to get a digital ticket.
It's in Denver. Yep. And it is, live or virtual. You can attend. And the people that are speaking are really cool. In my opinion, they're, Phil Gorski and Sam Perry, who wrote The Flag and the Cross, Catherine Stewart, who wrote The Power Worshippers, Robert Jones, who wrote White Too Long, Kyati Joshi, who wrote White Christian Privilege, and a couple of others. So, just some great ones. And you can find all of that at bradonishi.com/nationalism. So that's my stuff. And
awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. It is 5:49, and I told you I'd have you done by 5:50.
You're the best. You're
on
the
that
best.
note, go like, follow, subscribe, send Brad cookies. I don't know, make baby Jesus cry. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Oh shit. You done fucked up now. Ain't nothing but a gangster party. Y'all in deep doo-doo.